because the guy who produced it certainly was very busy with it. And we had a good team from ABC who did it for nothing, you know, just pro bono publico. Chomsky and I, of course, we have the same enemies. And by your enemies, one is celebrated, largely the New York Times. And this funny story of Chomsky. He went to the dentist, and the dentist said, you know, your teeth are all right, but you've got to stop grinding them. He said, I don't grind my teeth. He said, well, you do. The enamel is worn off. Well, I don't. So Mrs. Chomsky was there, and he asked this, well, when he sleeps, does he grind his teeth? He said, no, he doesn't grind his teeth. Well, they both got terribly interested. When did it happen? Well, they finally found out that in the morning while having coffee, and she might be out of the room, he would start to read the New York Times, and his teeth would... Mine grind, too, when I read that paper, particularly the things they do to that scientist at Los Alamos, or their invention of the Whitewater plot. It's a bad paper.
New Orleans next for Gore Vidal.
Yes, I love your books. I keep rereading, as a matter of fact, and one of the things that strikes me is that your work changes over the years. I mean, not my interpretation of your work changes over the years. For example, Messiah was that kind of book for me. It meant different things to me as different events took place in the country. But the thing I'm interested now is Lincoln. I'm rereading Lincoln, and one of the things I wanted to know, now that Dutch came out, is there any difference other than that ideology between your method and Edmund Morris's?
Okay, thanks for the call. Actually, would you speak a bit about Messiah before we turn to...
Yeah, Messiah came out. I had a period after The City and the Pillar when the New York Times book reviewer, Orville Prescott, and he was very powerful, he did about 5 daily reviews a week, told my publisher that not only would he never review a book by me, but he'd never read one. So I published 7 books that were never reviewed in the Daily New York Times, or by Time, or by Newsweek. This was a blackout. All because I had said in The City and the Pillar about the normality of a relation between 2 all-American boys, and I was the war novelist, etc., who was pronouncing upon this heresy. The 7th of the books that were not reviewed by the New York Times was Messiah. And it came out invisibly because you get no press, particularly if the Times will not look at it, or the news magazines. But something odd happened. It's about a man who sort of says he's a messiah, or people say he is. And his message is that death is no thing, therefore nothing can not be a bad thing. And in selling that, it becomes a sort of cult, which finally ends, a lot of it's been lifted from movies. Soylent Green stole a wonderful piece of it, where people go to commit suicide to these comforting places, and you lie and you look at a screen and you see movies or whatever. Well, the book became a cult book, and in no time at all, it just, more and more people started to read it and hand it around. And I was fascinated by the diversity of those who were drawn to this thing. On another level, it showed how easily through television that you could create a religion, how quickly it took Christianity centuries to take over Europe, and he does it in 2 or 3 years. Then at the end, of course, they want him to commit suicide, as he's encouraged others to do, and he doesn't want to, so they have to kill him and pretend that he killed himself, as death is no thing. And why it's because to this day is selling, and or at least it has not a great seller, but it has its devotees.
If television can so quickly create messiahs, why have we not seen them in the television age?
Well, we do. We see their spokespersons, the Jerry Falwell, Oral Roberts, Billy Graham. They're making a lot of money out of being professional prophets. It is, now that you've asked that question, that's an interesting one. It hasn't occurred to me why somebody hasn't used it to start a new religion. Well, Scientology. I don't know if they've used television, but they've certainly made themselves into a religion from a book by a science fiction writer of the 50s. We had the same publisher for Messiah that L. Ron Hubbard had for Dianetics. I guess that's the case, but not TV. You'd have to have a charismatic type. So far, they wrap themselves in Jesus or Sing My Way on television.
Flanders, New Jersey, you're next.
Yes, Mr. Vidal, an honor, sir. Two questions. First, what do you see the trajectory of the novel being in the next century? And second, can any amount of pleading on my behalf convince you to write an 8th novel in the series?
Well, plead some more. I might go back to 1846, but I don't see myself doing the Kennedy years or anything closer, because if I did it, having been involved, I would probably have to do another memoir to cover it, which might be the way of doing it, and I might yet do that. The novel is going through a strange patch. It's become academicized. Most of the writers, and certainly practically all of the reviewers, seem to be English teachers. I don't think this is necessarily a good thing. You can make books out of books. Writers have always done it or been inclined to do it, but anterior to literature is something called life. And if you haven't had a life, it is a really involved one, even if it's just simply an inner life sitting by a pond in New England, you're not going to be very interesting. And that, to me, is a problem that the writers now working, particularly the ones who are school teachers in universities, they've had so little experience of the world. And there's so much they've shut out. Mary McCarthy was wonderful on this. She made a list of all the things that a novelist may not do, a novelist who's considered serious. You can't have a sunset. You can't have an election. You can't have a really good dinner party. You can't have, and she just made this list of all the things which had made classic fiction great, had been carefully put away. Oh no, that would be corny. Oh, we don't know enough about elections. Have a president in the book? How could you write about it? What are you, some sort of fantasist? You don't know any presidents. So they pride themselves on the fact that they go to school, they stay in school, they get tenure, and some may have a real talent for writing. But there must be a little spark, which is known as life, to set you going. I had a fairly interesting life, and certainly 3 years of the Army gave me an awful lot to write about. So the trajectory, I don't think, is very promising. People who want narratives, who want to be amused by stories, are now video cassettes. I find something very odd going wrong with people who use computers. Now, maybe it's the people, or maybe it's just my inability to understand, but I think the prose is flattening out. I can tell computer prose very often now, particularly when the same paragraph occurs 3 times in 2 pages, and I know it's a computer on a blink. It'll be interesting to see what happens, but I think that the only form of prose that is going to last is the essay. People need that. It's short. It's one man's voice making connection with another person's eyes. It is, suddenly you've got Montaigne from 500 years ago, and he's talking to you as though you're in the room, and you can respond to him. It's really, the kinetic energy is so great between the great essayists and the readers.
Well, speaking of essays, we should tell our audience that a new collection of your essays is scheduled for the spring. For the spring, yes. They're reissuing United States, which Random House, my last publisher, the second I left them to go to Doubleday, pulped it. They just got rid of it. And the first, it was my collected essays over 50 years. That will be out with Doubleday in the spring, and a new volume of
of essays called The Last Empire. And that should do it.
Do you think that should do it?
Oh, I go on writing, of course, but this is a pretty big book of essays. It'll be some time before I have another volume.
Will you talk just a minute about editors over the years and how you use editors?
I don't have much to do with them. I've got a very nice one at Doubleday who's actually interested in books. Most of them are interested in marketing now, and their eyes glaze over at the thought of literature. He likes it, is dedicated to it. I had one very fatherly one, Nicholas Radin at E.P. Dutton, when I was 19, 20, and Dutton published about 7 novels, about 10 novels, ending with Messiah. And he was very nice, white Russian, and he was a very good editor. And no problem. I'm not edited, you know. I'm copy edited to go over to make sure that I have no dangling participles, but I don't get help for anything. I've completed the work by the time I give it to the publisher. And wonderful man at Little Brown, where I was probably happiest, and left them like a fool. They did Julian, and they did Washington, D.C., and they did Myra Breckinridge. And we had a successful time. Random House was not so pleasant, and Doubleday is.
Well, we're on the subject of how we write and the mechanics. When you described Grant's writing as West Pointian, what about your own? How would you describe your writing?
Well, I have different voices. I'm a mimic, and I can mimic